Just so everyone knows, we did just say we were live and we almost started doing the podcast, but thankfully we did catch that we didn't hit record. Randy, we're back. It's been, I don't know, it feels like it's been a couple of months. You've been moving. I've been
Mhm.
sick. You're doing cool things.
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, we moved from the small rural Pennsylvania town that we were living in to Pittsburgh. I'm actually like 2 blocks from the Duolingo offices right now, so, like, I can go to their taco stand that they have that they use to feed all the Duolingo people. It's awesome. It's just amazing to actually, like, be in the city, have access to buses, and be able to bicycle places, and it's just incredibly nice. And I also like shave my beard because I like to, make sure that every change and transition we have
Yeah,
is
it's
like,
reflected on your face. Yeah,
yes,
that is
yes,
true for
it's a
you. I've
map.
learned that. No, there's a lot that's changed since the last time we talked. I mean, the last time we spoke, you hadn't moved to Pittsburgh yet. We had a different president, so that's something. It was, like, not even really fall yet, so that was a thing. We've I mean, I've been, like I went on an 18-day hiatus just traveling and speaking and conferencing and all the things, and now we're back, we're settling down, but we're not alone today. We
No,
we
we're
started
not.
this thing where we've been bringing in guests because, well, that's the whole thing. It's good company. And you actually, I'm gonna let you introduce our guest today because you know our friend here better than I do. So tell the audience really quick, who are we talking to and what are we talking about today?
We are talking to the great Brendan Wu. Brendan is a UXer and designer, very talented in both of those regards. And he used to be a coworker of mine at Four Kitchens. We worked together, and it was really awesome. And Brendan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation and share a bit more about my experience with accessibility and also just maybe a little bit more of my background for anyone who's curious to know.
I am really curious actually. I gotta I guess have to I have to jump in. So for everyone that doesn't know, I just said for a second there like, "Oh, yeah, I traveled for whatever, 17, 18 days straight." I thought that was a lot. For folks who don't know Brendan, he's homeless. He has no home. He's he lives in the airport. That's his place of residence. Try to send him mail, he's not gonna get it.
That's
So,
fair.
last time we spoke, you were in Madrid, and
Correct.
now you're where?
I'm currently in Budapest in Hungary. Yes.
Okay.
That's awesome.
We need to be friends because I feel like they would be my one chance to. Have you seen like Catch Me If You Can? Christopher
Yes.
Walken, like,
Yes.
Mhm.
where you going, Frankie? Somewhere exotic? Tell me, like, where you at? So that's how I feel every time we speak. I'm like, I don't know. You're gonna be in Argentina next week, and I want to live vicariously through you. I don't know how you do it. You're like, oh, I spend a lot of my time in South America. I'm like,
I wish I was in Argentina next week. That would be a lot warmer weather. But no, we've decided to spend our Christmas season at Christmas markets in Europe. So we'll be here, Berlin, Poland, kind of bouncing around. For people who don't know, technically, I guess homeless, but I like to call myself a digital nomad. Um, you know, I
It's all
I
about the names. It's
it's
all
all
about the
about the
names.
name. It's all about
yeah.
how you see yourself, right? I work and travel. So my wife and I jetted off on our travels last July of 2023, and so I think that makes it 16 months or so that we've been traveling straight. We
Wow.
travel usually slow. We don't travel that fast. So we do like a month here, 2 months here. Uh, Currently, we're in this really short, fast 2 weeks like per city kind of pace, but that doesn't last long. We take it slow. I know when I first tell people this, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing," but like exhausting. It can be. We've managed burnout and stuff, but the slower you travel, the more you know yourself, the easier it is to enjoy and be present without feeling too frantic about doing all the travel things.
So when you're doing all the travel things, what is it you exactly do that pays for your Airbnb lifestyle of going everywhere under the sun and like being able to do that?
Fair, good question. So I am a UX UI designer, project designer, has all these types of terms nowadays. And tech jobs are very great for fueling and funding the digital nomad lifestyle, as you can usually find ones that can be done remotely. And so that type of work, that line of work, has been funding us as our travel. More recently, I have been teaching design. I teach design through a couple different companies and platforms, just to
Wow.
students, to corporations, to companies, things like that. Um, so yeah, that is a bit about what I've done. We're going to be talking about accessibility today, and I can dive more into that. But my accessibility journey just began earlier this year, and actually, that might be a good segue into it because as a designer, I think if you're a designer listening to this, you've probably heard the word accessibility. You probably know, oh, accessibility, something as a designer that's important, I should consider as I do my work. That might be where your knowledge ends. Because for me, that was the case for a while. Like I knew it was important. I knew it's something that I
It's a
had
thing
to
you have to do, right? Like, it's a check on the
ex-
checklist.
exactly. And that's, I mean, for years, even when I was at 4K, before, after that, it would just felt like something you had to consider. But why? But why? Who knows? But why? And then I was teaching a class to some students earlier this year, and it was something along the lines of they asked a question about like target size. What size the button need to be accessible? And I said 44 pixels. And they said, why? And I was like, I don't know.
Because that's the number I know.
Exactly. Someone down the line, probably a coworker of mine, had told me that number at some point, and I was
Mm,
just passing that number on to someone else. But I didn't know why that was the number. I didn't know why it mattered. And I realized for so much of my knowledge about accessibility, that was the case. I had heard a number, I had heard a fact, I had heard a principle somewhere down the line, but the why, the foundation of knowledge that actually made it make sense, made it valuable, actionable, wasn't there. And so that's what pushed me to start really deep diving into what does it mean when we talk about accessibility in design? What does it mean to apply accessibility to design, to take that into account, and how practically does that look?
Yeah, all of that, that's amazing, and asking why is so important to understand, like, why you're getting to the root of something. Like, to be able to parrot that 44 pixels is, I mean, it's an achievement, but to understand why it's 44
Exactly.
pixels or to be able to make adjustments because you understand the foundations is very important. But whenever it comes to being a designer, okay, developers, have all sorts of tools
Hmm.
to find and fix and flag accessibility concerns. As a designer, like, why is it important for us to consider accessibility? Like,
Yeah.
we want our designs to look beautiful. Is there, like, will it make it hard for us to have beautiful designs if we make them accessible?
That is probably one of the biggest misconceptions, or just at least perceptions about accessibility. I mean, there are several, right? Accessibility or making my designs accessible will make them look ugly. Making my designs accessible, it will be incredibly hard and time consuming, and we'll never get this thing launched. Making my designs accessible just is impossible. Like all these things that people think in their mind about accessibility that prevent that from ever really getting started into the world of accessibility. And I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. If you really go down the road of learning and trying to apply accessible practices to your designs, there will be some lines that you can't cross of, oh, this is a really cool website I saw out there. I would love to use this parallax or this overlay feature or something that it looks really awesome as a fully able sighted user. You do some research, do due diligence, you realize that's an accessible practice. I can't use that. If I want all users to be able to use my site, my product, my app, I can't just go around duplicating any trendy feature out
mm,
there
yeah.
because they may not have considered accessibility. And if you want to, you're going to have to start putting up some guide rails, putting up some uh, just principles that you're following, and that means you'll have to say no to some designs. But I don't want that to scare people because there's so much more that can come and good that can come from accessibility than just saying no to some bad things.
I'd be curious to know where it's okay to we see those lines within accessibility. At what point should we like push the bounds and see like, hey, maybe let's see if we can challenge what we know and maybe break some of those lines. And an example I'm thinking of is there was a project I saw like years ago, and it was for this NFT where it was an outer space NFT. And if you went to their website, you would start at the bottom of the page. So we're all trained. It's like when you go to a website, you're at the very top and you scroll down. Well, they started at the foundation, and there was like a little rocket ship animation thing on the right hand side. So if you would, they have to scroll up, and the rocket ship would go up. So it's kind of like catapulting you to outer space. My thought is, well, I feel like a lot of the users are just gonna like try to scroll down, see it can't go down any farther, and like that's the homepage. But they're like, no, this is so cool. This design is so awesome. We'll just put some wording there, and it's gonna work. It's gonna perform. Now, I don't have the data to see whether or not it did perform, but I remember at the time being like, I don't know. Like, I feel like now we've gone a little too far into the creative, and we've broken some like accessibility, some functionality that's just necessary. Like, we're trying to reinvent how people use websites, or at least on the homepage. So, and then it was, I think, kind of wonky because the other pages didn't work that way. So anyway, I'd love your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think it's so common for companies, people who have decision making power, stakeholders to go for the cool and flashy design. And I mean, that specific example, right? Scrolling up instead of scrolling down to kind of advance in the page is definitely breaking a lot of understood just patterns in navigation experience. I don't want to get too in the weeds necessarily, but I do think that that's just a good example of sometimes when a stakeholder suggests something, you might feel it's like I don't feel like this is gonna work, right? But if you just tell that to them, you're like, I don't know about this. They'll be like, well, I like it. It's cool. I'm the stakeholder. I'm gonna make that decision. I got the power. This is where accessibility comes in, or the knowledge of accessibility and principles and practices and um, just the whole set of standards. Because now you can go to them with actual data, actual written statements that say why things should be the way they are and how what the limitations are, and say it's not just I don't think it'll work. This is my rationale. This is why it matters. And these are all the users that you are now leaving out of your consideration when you design it this way. Um, there have been, especially this past year at different conferences, lots of talks and lots of emphasis around why accessibility matters just for even business, right? You have so many users who will leave your product if it is not accessible. You'll have people who have low vision that they can't use your product, people who have different dexterity issues can't use your product. You'll have even family members of people with disabilities, right? Who, as a family, right, maybe they purchase and use products together. If one of them has a disability and can't use it, the whole family will likely leave that product for an accessible one. And you are losing lots of customers, lots of revenue from making your products inaccessible. So that's something that I wish I could tell every stakeholder that I've ever seen. Just like, hey, like if nothing else, if it's not about the people, think about the money. But
Yeah. Oh, good.
I was going to say, but if you're a designer, what I would tell you, it's not about compliance. It's not about checking off a checkbox. It's about the people, and that's where we should always start when it comes to accessibility.
I want to build on that a little bit because, a lot of like stakeholders, whenever they think about like, disabled individuals or people with disabilities, they think about permanent disabilities. They think about,
Yes.
like this is someone who, only has one arm. This is someone who is atypical neurology, like things like that. There are temporary disabilities that impact people, like and I use the term disability, but it can be like a broken arm.
Mhm.
It can be you're sick, or maybe like your eyes are really like blurry and not working because you've just gotten out of like the doctor's office. It can be a parent holding a child and needing to do things one armed. By making it easier for people with disabilities, you're making it easier for people with temporary disabilities too. Like one of the things that I like to point out, and I'm going to do that here, is that two of the three of us have permanent disabilities because two of us are wearing glasses. So we're using disability aids right now, although we don't think of usually think of it in those terms.
Absolutely. One of my favorite, just personal examples about temporary disability is regarding subtitles and captioning. I was on an airplane, as one does when you're traveling, and they usually will come around, give out headphones if you're like an overseas flight or you bring your own. But I was sitting next to a woman on a flight, and she didn't have any headphones, and they hadn't offered any, and she watched an entire movie on the plane without headphones, and the TVs on the plane, they don't give out any audio. She watched the entire movie because that movie offered captioning. And she was able to understand and read all of those dialogue, all of the scenes and sound effects because of the captioning. And that's someone with, again, temporary disability, can't hear, but because a product, in this case the movie, was made accessible, she was able to enjoy it. And there are so many things like that. That I think the general phrase is like accessibility benefits everyone, not just people who have permanent disabilities, but people with temporary disabilities. You have the example of just even the curb cuts in, you're on a sidewalk. Those curb cuts are meant for people with wheelchairs. That's what originally they were designed for. People with strollers, people with luggage. Everyone uses these curb cuts. I mean, gosh, I drag my 50-pound check-in bag around with me all across the world. If these curb cuts
Isn't that called your life in that bag?
Yeah, I have my life in my bag. If these curb cuts didn't exist, well, I would probably have bigger biceps than I do now. But it would it's a lifesaver in so many ways to have that accessibility available for me to use.
With all of the new AI platforms that have come around in the last couple of years, I see one that I feel like is used all the time now on YouTube is this text to speech feature that I think I remember seeing years ago with like Apple, but now it just seems like people are using it to spoof Joe Rogan for podcasts and everything else. And there's so many of these things that maybe were used for something else that people are using now for content creation or whatever else. So I'm curious with all of the different tools that are out there, what's your favorite? Is there something you use or something maybe you enjoy as just a consumer or something you like working with? What does that look like?
That's interesting. Because I would say at this point, there's not one tool I like, oh my gosh, I enjoy using. Like, I guess enjoy is an interesting word to use. I enjoy using this accessibility tool. Rather, I have all these like aha moments when I discover tools. Like, oh my goodness, this tool is so good for blank. Or this tool that I once only used for this purpose can be repurposed for another purpose. So for instance, there are all these accessibility checkers that exist in the world of gosh, I just clicked one on my computer and then this streaming tool just broke. So I'm currently looking at all of you through a tool called Wave. It's a web accessibility evaluation tool. It highlights just errors. It's a plugin on Google Chrome. I think on other browsers too, you can just quickly install it. But it will highlight any errors, contrast, color, just header breaks, things like that. And it's really quick to just evaluate is a product broken. Like I use this on my portfolio when I was designing it. Every time I would just open up my portfolio page, click on it, take a look. WAVE, just put that into your browser search. You should be able to find it as a plugin. But there's so many others, right? You have contrast tools. You have, so gosh, that my mind just went blank after contrast tools. You have AI, right? You have things like ChatGPT that, again, we might use for helping us write currently or help us maybe create some user flows. But I was recently in an accessibility workshop where the facilitator used ChatGPT to give him accessibility personas, to give him like really tangible ways to design components accessibly. You could use AI tools to help you write alt text. There's so many ways to consider what already exists and also, new tools that you're going to discover, but how can we repurpose what we have and take into account accessibility in our processes? And it's not always about finding the next new tool, finding the next best thing. Sometimes they already exist in your tool belt. You just need to broaden your mind to consider them a little more.
So kind of bringing this back to designers, like the Wave tool evaluates like the coded page itself. It reads an HTML page. And it's great. I use that tool all the time myself. But as a designer, I spend most of my time in Figma. And so like within Figma, are there plugins within Figma that can help? That
Oh
can
my
like help
goodness.
guide me?
So many
I mean,
plugins.
well, I know this is a bit seeded because you are like the plugin master of Figma. You've got like a huge cataloged collection, don't you?
Yeah, I have a big collection. It's just a Notion database, but yeah, there are so many accessibility plugins out there, and honestly, they just keep getting better. So yeah, if you're a designer listening to this, I guess just write these down. Pause after I say. I'll take a pause. But the Stark accessibility plugin, they used to be known. I used to only know them for color contrast and thickness. They have added so much. You can do header tags. You can do annotations. You can do so much with that plugin. Super powerful. There's also, oh gosh, what was it called? I mean, there are simple color contrast ones. One's just called Contrast. I like Contrast Checker. Historically, I always, if I'm testing the color contrast in Figma, will test with a plugin, but also plug the hex values into like the Adobe Color Contrast website, other things like that, because I don't know, maybe I'm just skeptical. I just need to just double check my work to make sure that the values, the ratios that are being exported and shown to me are accurate. Um, what else? Oh, there's really good, not even just plugins, but community files that exist. So CVS has their whole accessibility annotation document ready and available for you to use. It's just turrets in Figma for the CVS accessibility. Their file should pop up. It's a wonderful set of components to help you annotate your designs for developers to understand about accessibility. That you can, like, if you have a team plan on Figma, you can add that library to any of your files with a click of the button, immediately add them and start annotating your designs. Um, I do want to backpedal slightly or just take a step back because I think my tendency initially, right, with some, I think it's similar to many designers in that I do start finding these tools, right? I start finding these little things. I'm like, oh my gosh, let's create a list, and yeah, and then it's all of a sudden you like, oh, you have all these tools, you have all these resources, and then you have a checklist again, and then you're like, oh my gosh, can I use this plugin to check this? Gotta do to add these annotations using this resource. Gotta ask the devs about this. Gotta use this Chrome plugin to analyze the HTML of the site. All important, but if that's all you do, if that's all I did, I'd still be missing it. I'd be missing the point of accessibility because I'm still trying to check off those boxes. But can a person who with a disability actually use my site? Actually enjoy? Am I giving people? Am I actually considering the person into my design process? Because I think the biggest way to do this, which is probably the biggest hurdle for everyone, is to actually test and invite those with disabilities into your circles, right? Bring them
Yeah.
into the planning phase. Like send your prototypes out to them. Like I was in a call with someone who identifies as blind, and the way with a bunch of designers, and she asked them to describe their designs to her because she can't see them. Everyone got so nervous. They all claimed because they had never before tried to describe their designs to a blind user. What does a button look like? What does a card component look like? Where is the text located? What color is the text? Where is it located on the page? How many items over is the one that you're trying to have her access? And it just, I mean, it was an eye-opening experience. It was a beautiful experience for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I also realized there is such a need for this to become a norm for us as designers, not a unique once in a lifetime experience. I'm testing with a blind user. This is amazing. It should be second nature that we default to that it's included in our design process. There are companies, there are resources, there are communities that can do this for us. We just don't currently, I believe, prioritize them as much in our process as we should.
So, with that, going along that same train of thought, coach me then. If I had someone who was blind and said, "Help me understand," I say, "Yeah, well, we have this blue landing page," and they say, "Define blue." Like, how would you help someone in that case, right? Like you're saying, you're going through that process. Someone that identified as blind. What does that practically look like?
That's a good question. Now, colors, and again, I'm not going to claim myself as an expert on any of this, but I think colors is very interesting description. But for instance, and because I broke this current page that we're on using Wave, I'm going to go to, for instance, like my Gmail. If I again, this is honestly perfect and was something I would love to do on podcasts for listeners, because if you're listening to this and you're not in YouTube, I mean, actually, I'm not even sharing my screen, but you can't see what I'm looking at on my screen. Right? And so, I mean, so I'm guessing many of you are Gmail users, but even if you are, or even if you're not, like, how would you describe the landing page of Gmail? So for me, I would go, okay, on the top of the page, there is a navigation bar. On the left side, there is a hamburger menu that expands out, or sorry, there's a hamburger menu that collapses and expands the sidebar. There is the Gmail logo, and then there is a search bar that will search your mail for you if you type an input in. There is filters that you can filter down that search for that are included in that search bar. And then to the right of the navigation bar, there is a help icon, there's a settings icon. Actually, I don't even know what this one is. There's a Gemini icon for AI features that I've never used. There is a 9.3 by 3 grid that has all the other applications that are included in Google. And then there is your user icon to manage and switch accounts. So something like that. Again, I'm not sure if that's perfect, but you start to get a feel for, okay, if
Yeah.
someone can't see my designs, I gotta start explaining them functionally, locationally, in a way that they'll understand, they can accurately navigate.
Yeah, and this is exactly what a screen reader does, is that it
Yes.
communicates to a user verbally what is on the page. And so like one of the things that I encourage people to do is to get a screen reader and to experience a page and realize that that developers have to add labels to these things. Like you mentioned like the hamburger menu button that was there. And it's like, you're describing what it looks like
Exactly.
in, but you should be describing what it does instead. And so like instead of calling it a hamburger menu for like visual people, it should be like, sidebar reveal button or
Hmm.
something like that. And so, this exercise of going through and needing to describe everything allows us to then kind of try and find better language to describe what's going on with the page. Like for instance, there are a lot of websites where they have like, skip to content or skip to navigation to like allow like people who are using screen readers to just kind of like skip over common things on the page. Like they don't need the header every time. They don't need to tab
Hmm.
through it. They just
Exactly.
need to
Yeah.
go straight to the content and listen to what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That there's I learned was it just a few months ago that there were two different ways to navigate pages, right? There's the I guess like top down method where you just kind of tab through everything. But there's also landmarks, and you can navigate
Mhm.
pages by in HTML. If you tag different sections as landmarks, you can skip between sections. Whoa. Again, who knew? But if you experiment with screen readers, if you kind of put yourself into that world, you'll learn so much about how users use your products in ways that you never could have imagined.
So take me through. It's time to do an audit, perform an audit. You need to check your stuff. There's been a lot of updates. There's all these new plugins you've never heard of that are out there, and you're thinking, okay, we should probably see if our stuff is still up to snuff. How often would you recommend someone go out to see if they should just check on their accessibility features and see what could be enhanced? Like once a year, or like what does that look like?
Interesting question. I think I mean, in an ideal world, it's so baked into your process that it's not a once a year thing. It's every time we launch, every time we can think of a new feature, every time, yeah, we design, the annotations are included. It's just so well incorporated. But I mean, in the world we live in, right? That's not so many companies. That's not reality for them. Uh, and to introduce that gradually is probably the best way to go. But yeah, find those milestones for, I'd say first before you launch things. Like if you have a big launch coming up and you haven't checked for accessibility, that's the first thing you should kind of consider. Like, oh, we're adding a whole new page, we're adding a whole new feature, a whole new whatever it is. Try doing an accessibility check, and if you've never done one, We'll start there before you've done anything else. Try to get that on the pipeline that you want to do an accessibility audit to understand the current state. A really big part of any product is having just your accessibility statement on your site to say what we've done, what we're doing, and be open and honest about your current state. Because I mean, some companies will say, "Oh, we are like perfect. We've checked all the boxes," and that's just not possible. So don't be that
There
guy. Don't be that
there
company.
are always errors on pages.
Yeah. So there's a certain level of well, I guess there's two things. There's one, yes, you need to do due diligence. You need to start testing. You need to start auditing and start somewhere if you've never done anything. But the other one is again, it's not about compliance, it's about people. So show the people that you want to be your users who are disabled in that community. Show them that you care. Show them that you are working to improve your product, even if it's going to take time. That you're making that effort, taking those steps, and that's where that kind of the accessibility statement comes in because you recognize, hey, we're not perfect, but we're trying. We want to get there. So help us out. If you encounter a bug on our site, encounter an issue that prevents you from using something, please send us a message. Let us know. Our team will take a look at it and we'll get back to you. So I think that's the two pillars to work on. First, take that audit step, really get an understanding of what the state of accessibility is on your site, but focus on the people. Put a statement out there, be transparent, show that you care, and invite the community to help you improve.
So for listeners who are checking this episode out today and they've decided, okay, this sounds like a really neat career, how does someone get started?
Career, that's interesting. If they want to niche down in accessibility, there's so many ways to do that. But it's overwhelming. Okay, and I agree. And I wouldn't even say that I'm quote unquote an accessibility designer right now. It's just something that I'm really growing a passion for because I find it so meaningful and fascinating and valuable and all these things. So a few things. If you are listening and you want to dive further into accessibility, uh, take a deep breath first and foremost, because the first thing most people think is, "Oh my gosh, it's too complex. I'm so overwhelmed. Where do I even begin? What do I do?" You start shaking and you start freaking out, and you stop before you even started. And that was me probably for like 2 to 3 months after like thinking about accessibility because I just didn't know where to start. And the good thing is, you can really start anywhere. What I would recommend first and foremost is finding entry level books, classes, or bite-sized nuggets from accessibility experts. So, for instance, books. Find a book that is really geared towards you as a designer, as a someone who's going into this for the first time. I'm currently reading WCAG for Designers by Stacy Swinehart Ganderson. Phenomenal book, just super simple way to break down accessibility for people who are new to it's incorporating this into designs and understanding how what the why behind accessibility. Again, so important. Another book I've heard great things about, I haven't read yet, is I think Accessibility for Designers. It was part of the A Book Apart series, not available for purchase on their site because they've since closed their doors, but the publisher or the author is still selling your book. So those two books I heard great things about if you're an entry level designer. As a class, I took edX's Intro to Web Accessibility course online. It was free. Didn't need to pay for anything. You could pay if you want the certificate. I was like, I'll take it for free and just get all the insights I can. It's a little old in the UI, so don't let that scare you away. But the content is phenomenal because it really does start with people. It starts with understanding who they are and why we should understand disabilities, why we should value them, how to kind of put yourself in their shoes. And then I learn best, I think, by gradual, bite-sized pieces of nuggets. Because if you're actually interested in getting into accessibility more, into understanding it more, be prepared to commit for the long haul. It's not once I've done a class, once I've read a book, I'll be done. Once I've read these many articles, I'll be done. It's a never-ending process. And I think that's part of the beauty of it because people are so complex, people evolve, and people are changing and growing, and our knowledge is growing. And so accessibility knowledge will continue growing as long as we are here on this earth. So be prepared to go in for the long haul. and to just chip away and learn a little bit every day. And again, I find the best way to do that for me is by following people online. So I follow a lot of accessibility experts on LinkedIn. Um, should I name drop people here? Is that this is this podcast?
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me just check out my LinkedIn to make sure who I'm following. Stephanie Walter. She is a UX researcher and strategist who talks a lot about accessibility. Really good resources for people who are new to accessibility. Another one is Megan Thomas, Maigen. She regularly does accessibility audits, kind of just open to the public. I mean, it's like a $10 fee to attend, but she kind of just breaks it down really well, and it kind of shows people how to do accessibility audits. You have Jesse James Arnold. He's the a director of design at a agency I follow. He really talks about accessibility and inclusivity from a high level design system standpoint. He really talks about design systems and how they're kind of considering that in their choices and their decisions at a company. There is a lot more. There's one, Jesse Sookney, Sookne. He is, I think, an individual like advisor, accessibility advisor, who just posts regularly about helping people make their product accessible. But yeah, again, if you follow just like 2 or 3 of these people, and every day, one of them posts, 2 of them post, 3 of them posts, you will slowly start to assemble accessibility knowledge. You can save their posts, right? You can do whatever, but that's the most helpful when you're not like, oh my gosh, I have a fire hose amount of information I'm trying to swallow and apply to my day job. That's probably never going to go very well. Like it just doesn't work that way usually for most people. But if it's bite sized, if it's little at a time, oh, I'm chewing on this, I'm mulling on, oh, this little interesting accessibility fact. Oh, okay, I understand a little more. I can apply that to my work. Over time, gradually, you'll start to build up your skills, and then before you know it, and if you can kind of network that within your company, before you know it, your processes have adopted that. Your coworkers have adopted that. Your business, if you've been advocating for it, now values accessibility. It's in those small daily steps that take that. I'm going to read a chapter a day. I'm going to do a class a day. A week. I'm going to do consume a little tidbit of information every day until before you know it, you are, I guess, for all intents and purposes, the accessibility expert in your circles.
As we close this out, I have one final question I need to know before we let you go. Brendan, what are you doing? Are you going to, where you going next, Brendan? Someplace exotic? Tell me, where you going?
My wife and I are hanging out in Europe for the winter. We're gonna hit a bunch of Christmas markets. The Christmas market in Budapest actually opens on my birthday, so we'll go there. We'll go to Berlin, so Christmas market. Gonna go to Poland for a Christmas market, and yeah, we're kind of hanging around here for a bit. We're gonna spend New Year's in Prague, show a friend around Warsaw, Poland, and then the way we plan, who knows? We might go to Asia in the spring. We might come back to the US for a bit. I do know we will be moving to Italy for a year, starting next March.
Okay. Wow.
So if
Oh,
anyone wants to come
wow.
visit us, my wife is starting a master's program out there. So if anyone wants to come visit, let me know. Hit us up. But yeah, quite a busy next few months ahead of us.
So, with all the cool things you're doing and people want to follow your journey, where can they follow you?
So if you want to follow, I guess, less of my journey and just more me as a designer and just talking about accessibility, you could follow me on LinkedIn. It's Brendan Wu Design. You can just type in Brendan Wu Design and I should pop up in the search bar. If you want to follow Travel Brendan, you can follow me at world.wide.wubs, so WUBS on Instagram. The name that we came up with is a little bit of a pun because we're designers, both designers and techies, and so we're World Wide Web. And when we first got married, my wife and I hyphenated our last name, which, when shortened, was WUB, W-U-B. So we called ourselves the World Wide Wubs to both signify travel, design, and have our last name in there. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram if you'd like to see what we're eating in Budapest. It'll be on there.
Cool. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for being our second guest. Randy, have we had
I
two
think, yeah,
guests?
I think it's our
All right,
second guest. So
second
yeah,
guest ever.
awesome.
Yes, this has been a fantastic
Wow.
conversation. Yep. I hope you were listening, everyone. Hope you're all ears because it was a fantastic conversation. And there's a ton of great things to listen to, plugins, insights, people to follow, books. You're going to need the transcript. Thankfully, like there's accessibility features out there that can provide it. So, because I'm not writing all these things
Amazing.
down. So it's out there. So go check it out. Otherwise, that is this week's episode of Design in Good Company. Randy, got anything else to say?
No, sorry.
All right.
I
Yeah.
honestly,
No.
I think that really like just kind of brings us home. Like I think we learned a lot about accessibility today, and there's a lot to apply. So it was awesome, and it was
Yeah.
great being able to catch up with you, Brendan.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
you as
you
well.
encapsulated it well. Thankfully, there's nothing else to learn. That was all there is was this episode of Design a Good Company. So we all know everything
Uh,
we need to know. That's not true. Go follow
It was
Brendan,
all little
learn more.
bite-sized nuggets. We're fine.
All bite-sized nuggets. That's all we need. Go follow Brendan to learn more. Otherwise, that is Design a Good Company, hosted by Four Kitchens. Go check them out. Randy, where can people go follow Four Kitchens at? Where are we at?
Sure. So you can go to our website at fourkitchens.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Just type in Four Kitchens and you can follow us and see all of the cool stuff that we're doing. We're always having webinars. We give talks at conferences. We've got blog posts. We've got all sorts of information that we're always sharing on LinkedIn. Please come and give us a follow and engage. Let us know what you want to hear more about.
And that's it. That's all we got for you today. So, go listen to something else. Otherwise, yeah, just go do something. Go enjoy the day. Go travel. Go see the world. Go someplace exotic. This is Design Good Company. We'll catch you again next time.